Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Zaka Jacob. We're coming to you live from the CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Primetime studio. The political uproar over the Union Budget 24-25 continues in Parliament, even as the discussion on the finance bill has begun in the Houses. The opposition's biggest bone of contention against the budget is that it is heavily skewed towards just two states, Andhra Pradesh and Bihar. Now that, the opposition says, is not for any altruistic reasons. It is born out of pure political compulsion. And that is because the Modi government is dependent on support from allies in these two key states, that's Chandrababu Naidu and Nitish Kumar. The government's counter to this is that just because some states' names were not taken during the budget speech, and remember, the budget speech is a condensed version of the entire finance bill, which runs into hundreds of pages, the government's contention is it does not mean that those states whose names have not been taken in the speech are not getting anything. For example, the Finance Minister today made the case of Maharashtra to underscore her point that this is what is being given to Maharashtra through budget and off-budget allocations. So then this charge of the opposition of bias against opposition-ruled states or bias in favor of just two states where allies rule, does that charge still hold?
बजट में किसी स्टेट को कुछ नहीं मिला और सबके थाली खाली और दो के थाली में पकोड़ा और जलेबी।
समर्थन मूल्य किसान को न मिल करके जो अलायंस पार्टनर है, जो सरकार बचा रहे हैं, उन्हें समर्थन मूल्य सरकार दे रही है। ये तो अखबारों में भी छपा है। क्या मिला यूपी को?
It has been planned by two and executed for two. It's an anti-people budget.
I would challenge the Congress party for all the budget speeches that they've delivered, that in each of the budget speeches, have they named every state of this country? This is an outrageous allegation.
I would like to thank the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, Nirmala Sitharaman ji, and also the central government for putting special focus on Andhra, which is very much needed.
हम लोगों ने एक कह दिया कि विशेष राज्य का दर्जा दीजिए या विशेष अधिकार के लिए मदद दीजिए। यहाँ के लिए जो जरूरत है बिहार के लिए, क्योंकि बिहार को भी आगे बढ़ना है।
All right, full MPs panel joining us this evening here on Brass Tacks. Aparajita Sarangi is Lok Sabha Member of Parliament of the BJP, J.B. Mathur, Rajya Sabha Member of Parliament of the Congress Party, Priyanka Chaturvedi, Rajya Sabha Member of Parliament of the Shiv Sena UBT, and Kesineni Shivnath is Lok Sabha MP of the TDP. Aparajita Sarangi, let me start with you. The opposition's contention is that the special allocations that have been mentioned in the budget speech are only for two states, for Bihar and for Andhra Pradesh. For Bihar, all of the roadways, the irrigation projects, the flood relief, the temple development, all of that put together adds up to in excess of 40,000 crores. As far as Andhra Pradesh is concerned, 15,000 crores have been earmarked for Amravati, plus unspecified amounts for Polavaram project and other backward districts, etc., etc. So these are the only two states that have got the lion's share of the allocations, is the contention by the opposition. Please respond.
A very good evening. I will start by saying that this budget, the seventh budget presented by Madam Nirmala Sitharaman and the 11th budget of PM Modi's government, follows a pattern of yesteryears. It talks of heavy capital expenditure and high welfare spending while keeping growth targets robust and fiscal deficit in check. That's the nature of the budget that was presented by Madam Nirmala Sitharaman. I must mention here that she spoke for 82 minutes in the Lok Sabha. I was sitting there. And let me tell you very candidly that it is not possible for the Finance Minister to name all the states in these 82 minutes of her speech. We have to understand this. But at the same time, I would like to mention here that 48 lakh crore rupees will be spent in 24-25 in accordance with the budget that was approved in the Lok Sabha. Now here, that is under deliberation in the Lok Sabha. Now let me tell you that whatever spending that will be done in Bihar and in Andhra Pradesh is just a subset of the larger set. All the states would be getting their due. But it's not possible to mention all the states. Now here, there is a point which I want to make very emphatically. We are going for polls in 3 states, Maharashtra, Jharkhand and Haryana. Now, had Honorable Finance Minister mentioned the budget provision of these 3 states, I tell you today all these opposition parties people would have raised voice against us saying that we are trying to lure the voters. We have not mentioned Jharkhand, we have not mentioned Haryana because of paucity of time, but yes, they do find place. Maharashtra does find place. And in fact, in one of her interviews, she candidly said, our finance minister, that Badhavan port for 76,000 crore would be coming up in Maharashtra and the union cabinet has approved. Very easily she would have spoken about Maharashtra, but she did not because, it's not possible to mention all the states in 82 minutes.
Okay.
Now, every issue cannot just be politicized. Now, let me just tell you, Bihar has a population of about 13 crore and Andhra Pradesh has about 6 crore of population, 19 crore population. I think all these people who are creating a ruckus are not finding any fault with this particular budget, and that is why they are trying to kind of, find out some truti, some error somewhere, and they are anti-Bihar and they are anti.
Okay.
Andhra
So
Pradesh,
let me
I would
open this
say
up to
very
the other panelists. Priyanka Chaturvedi, with specific regard to Maharashtra, and today the finance minister mentioned this as well. The government says, look at all the announcements that have been made just in the last few months, many of them just before the Lok Sabha elections. Projects worth 36,000 crores were inaugurated by the Prime Minister just before the budget announcement. The Thane-Borivali Tunnel project at a cost of 16,600 crores, Goregaon-Mulund link project at a cost of 6,300 crores, Kalyan Yard remodeling at a cost of 812 crores, multimodal cargo terminal to boost commodity management and job creation, new platforms at Lokmanya Tilak terminus to accommodate more trains, extension of platforms 10 and 11 at the Shivaji Maharaj terminus. Now, all of these may not have found place in the budget speech, but certainly all of this is going to Maharashtra.
So, firstly, thank you so much for reading out whatever has been handed over by the Finance Ministry of India, what we were expecting. And the discrimination doesn't come from our end. The discrimination comes from the Union Minister of India. She must remember she's the Finance Minister of India. We were not expecting her to name any state. When you have 1 rupee in your hand to spend or 100 rupees in your hand to spend, and you have the responsibility to spend that in an equitable manner, we hope that you will spend it in an equitable manner. For every 1 rupee that Maharashtra sends to the center, we get 3 to 5 paise back, and whatever, whatever you've counted out right now, thankfully so, is all part of that. What we are saying is make it equitable. In her speech, she chose to name these states repeatedly, making it sound like this was the Union Budget of India is not Union Budget of India. It is the Pradhan Mantri Sarkar Bachao Yojana, which she has implemented in the hope that she feels that their government will be safe for the next 5 years. Because they also know that this government is dependent on the crucial support of these 2 political parties. So, having said that, I'm sure you have a handout that is given by the Finance Ministry of India for the various other states she did not name. But I will not get into the narrative. The narrative is very simple. Who started this discrimination? Did it come from us or did it come from the Madam Finance Minister herself? And that is the unfortunate part. And listen, this is just one part of the argument. Whether we look at the women-led growth budget, etc., what have they done for the women of this country? What have they done for the youth of this country? What have they done for the farmers of this country? I can argue on various facets. And when you talk about, fiscal consolidation is something like, let's celebrate that the operation is successful but the patient is dead. When private consumption was at its weakest in India, when savings is at lowest in India, when investments are at its lowest in India, that's when you're talking about fiscal consolidation. So these are a few facts that need to be brought on the table, which I'm trying my best to do. And again, 82 minutes also would have sufficed without naming any state, but you chose to name those states. And Madam was saying that 13 crore population of Bihar and some 8 odd crores of Andhra Pradesh. I come from the state of Maharashtra, which has a population of 12 crores. Even they are witnessing how they are being, I would say, not getting their due.
Okay.
As much as they were seeking in this particular budget.
So, Mr. Kesineni Shivnath is a TDP Lok Sabha MP. He's now joining us. Mr. Shivnath, So the charge by the opposition India bloc against your government is that a bulk of these resources have been hogged by Andhra Pradesh and Bihar. Again, not for any altruistic or charitable reasons, simply because Mr. Modi is dependent on Mr. Chandrababu Naidu and dependent on Nitish Kumar. In the case of your state, 15,000 crores will be made available through multilateral development banks, that's World Bank, ADB, etc., for the development of Amaravati. Unspecified number of funds will be provided by the central government for Polavaram project. Backward districts in Rayalaseema, again, unspecified amount of funds will be provided for them. There's also a Visakhapatnam-Chennai industrial corridor that will be developed. So the contention of the opposition is that a bulk of the resources have gone to these two states.
Thank you, Mr. Jacob and all the panelists. And here, the Indian government is running under the cooperative federal system. So equitable development is required for every state. The central government has to look at for the equitable development for every state. So to get that level playing field, the central government has to give support Andhra, which was bifurcated by UPA government at that time. And in the reorganization bill, we have already in this budget, we have got the things in like Amaravati or Polavaram, which were there on the reorganization bill, which was organized by the UPA government during the year 2013-14 when the Andhra Pradesh was bifurcated. We didn't get any extra from it, and from past 10 years, we are waiting for these things because we are only the state. So in the total entire country, without a capital, we are the only state that is Andhra Pradesh. So according to the Reorganization Act, we have to get the funds for the capital and as well as for the Polavaram project and also the backward districts of Andhra Pradesh. So to have the level playing field for Andhra Pradesh, since we are in a very financial crisis, to get that level playing field for all the state playing field with equal to the other states, we are supported by the central government with the things which are there in our reorganizations. We didn't even get any benefit. So this is already there, and it was already moved by the India, this thing which was that time called as an UPA alliance. So this is not a new thing, it was an old thing, I can say you clearly.
Okay, so you are saying that you have not been given anything special that you are undeserving of. These were promises made in the AP Reorganization Act. It's been only delivered now, 10 years later. But let me ask J.B. Mathur.
Yeah.
J.B. Mathur, you know, the allocation that is sent to every state, the total expenditure, the total allocations of the Government of India are to the tune of 48 lakh crores. What each state gets is decided by the Finance Commission, in this case the 15th Finance Commission, which is a constitutional body. It's not the Government of India, the central government, that decides how much which state gets. Even if the central government wanted to reduce the percentage that goes from the Consolidated Fund of India to any of the states, those states can take the government to court, sue the central government for the same. So to say that two states have been shown partiality towards, or that other states have been given a raw deal, no one can take away the 8% or 9% that the Finance Commission has said will be devolved to Maharashtra every year as per the Finance Commission's remit. Same is the case for Kerala or Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or any state in the Union of India. JB.
Saka, let me first say, for any government, any budget, it states what the priorities are. Now for this government, the minute we got this speech of Finance Minister and we heard Finance Minister, we have been trying to understand that what is the priority of this government. And the priority is definitely not farmers, because what is rightfully due to them, it's not given. Priority is definitely not women, because women's safety and security, it is cut. The budgetary allocation is cut on women's safety and women's security. And about employment. Employment, okay, the entrepreneurship or incentive scheme is there. Other than that, what is the solid scheme which can put this 9.2% of unemployment rate in India, how they can address it? Now, another issue, all these burning issues, what is the priority for the government? Priority is definitely not farmers, not women, not youth, but to maintain their chair, to ensure that stays in power, and that is very clear from the budget allocation. Now, coming to your question. You are saying that as per Finance Commission, certain percentage goes to each state. Now, let me ask you something. You said that if the states want, they can go to court. Is the federal structure the situation in our country that if the rightful demands made by the states are not met, and there is a partisan approach by the central government very clearly visible, then every state now should go to court and ask for what is due to them? Is that how all these years the system, the governments have been functioning?
No, Jebby, the point that the central government is making, just give me 1 second. The point that they are making is it's the Finance Commission that has recommended which state gets apportioned how much from the Consolidated Fund of India, from the revenues that the central government collects, both direct and indirect. It's not been decided by the central government. It's not been decided by BJP MPs or by Narendra Modi. It's been decided by the Finance Commission. And not even Narendra Modi can change that, or Nirmala Sitharaman can change that. What is due to each state has to be given as per Finance Commission recommendations.
No, whether it's Finance Commission or whether it's CBI or ED or how the agencies, how it functions, we all know. The entire country knows how, whatever is under the government, it functions. So, now let me get to the specific. You particularly said about Kerala. Let me say Kerala has been totally ignored by the central government. Why? Because it is there's nobody supporting in Kerala for this government, or this government is not dependent on Kerala MPs. Is that the reason? We asked for aims. We gave the land, but no mention of aims. We asked for the largest transshipment container terminal package. That is not given. Flood relief package for Kerala. No, that's not given. Debt, that is not given. And also one more thing about Madam Sarangi ji was saying about this government or this budget is totally for the welfare, high on welfare spending. When you cut Manrega, which is the largest poverty alleviation program, employment generation program, you cut on Manrega, you cut on women's security, and where are you saying you cut on education, you cut on you cut on health, and who is getting the relief?
Aparajita Sarangi,
in terms of tax regime also, who is getting the relief?
How are you justifying the measures in the budget when women's safety budget has been cut, when health has been cut, when education budget has been cut? This is a contention by the opposition that on all of these critical parameters, welfare parameters, if you've cut allocations compared to last year, then what sort of welfare budget is this?
With all humility, I would request Madam to go through the provisions laid down in the budget proposal. There is mention of Manrega and there is sufficient allocation in Manrega. I have handled Manrega as Joint Secretary for 5 years. During the time of revised budget proposal, if there is any shortage of funds, Prime Minister Modi's government has been giving the entire filling up the shortage. Every year it has been doing, and in the days to come also it will do if the demand comes. Now here let me be very clear about certain things. Bihar has the lowest per capita income in the country. Now if Bihar goes for an expressway in Patna, Purnia, or from Buxar to Bhagalpur, or if there is a bridge over Ganga, and if there are certain infrastructures to combat the onslaught of flood, or if there is a power plant in Pirpaiti in Bihar, I think all of us should be happy about it. Because Bihar with 13 crore population is lowest in the ladder in terms of per capita income. So I don't think there is any reason why we should not be accepting or not be supporting this. So this is an anti-Bihar approach. This is an anti-Andhra Pradesh approach. If Amravati gets 15,000 crore for, getting it properly done up, I think we all should be happy about it. Andhra Pradesh will have a very beautifully looking capital, and I think all of us should be happy about it. And number two thing, see, in the budget, there are provisions under different schemes. Agriculture has 1,52,000 crore, RD has about 2.66 lakh crore, 3 crore for 3 crore houses under PMAY scheme would be built. I would just ask all the panelists whether this money would not go to all the states or this money will go only to Bihar and Andhra Pradesh.
Okay, Priyanka
See,
Chaturvedi,
the
respond.
budget provisions under
the
different
big
schemes
flagship
would
schemes,
definitely
whether it
be
is
going
the
to all the states.
Anna Yojana, whether it is
Yeah.
allocation for agriculture, building 3 crore homes for the poor, certainly it's not going to go to only to Andhra Pradesh or to Bihar.
So, okay, two things. I think there's so much of confusion in this narrative. Right now, the TDP spokesperson has said it was part of the Andhra Pradesh reorganization bill, nothing special has been done. Right?
Yeah.
So the second question to be asked is then why was Bharatiya Janata Party holding on to this money and waiting for Andhra Pradesh to somehow get into power in Andhra Pradesh and then release these funds? A simple question to ask. The second question would be, in Andhra Pradesh has a very unique, is very uniquely placed, where YSRCP also supports the Bharatiya Janata Party and TDP also supports the Bharatiya Janata Party. But Bharatiya Janata Party went into an alliance with TDP. So they released the funds that were promised in the AP Reorganization Act, as per what the TDP person has spoken just now, right? This is how I understand. So the confusion then is, the question that needs to be asked is, why has BJP been holding on to these funds for last 10 years and chose to make it public now that they're releasing these funds and make it sound like, oh, humne apni sarkar bacha li. What was holding
let the
them
TDP
back? That's
spokesperson
question
respond
one.
to that. Mr.
So,
Shivnath.
question two, please don't interrupt.
Actually,
Please don't interrupt.
No, you
Allow
asked
me
him
to-
a question, let him
me
answer the question, then I'll come back
No,
to you. for
please
question
allow
two.
me to complete here.
Arey, question 2
No,
is on a
this is
different
not-
subject. No, his question 2 also to the
2014
TDP
to 19
spokesperson.
No, one
BJP
second,
was
one
there.
second.
We were
Let me
allocated
also
with the
ask the
number of
question of Bihar.
institutes in the Andhra Pradesh, as well as the NDA government is supporting Andhra Pradesh from 2014 to 19. This is the main problem, is the unscientific division of Andhra Pradesh during the UPA regime. After NDA came into power from 2014, we have got lot of institutes, and as well as the support is being done by the NDA government for the Andhra Pradesh.
No, she's
Already
asking
they
you,
have
why was
allotted
this
for
money
the
not released for
capital
the last
region.
10 years? Mr. Shivnath, why was this
It was
money not released for the
from
last 10
2000
years?
to 19. Yeah, let me talk to you. 2014 to 19, a part amount of amounts were released. But what I'm saying is the position of our state, the financial position of our state is very bad because of from 2019 to 24, because of the Jagan Reddy's government, lot of
Okay, so that's a political point. Okay, Priyanka Chaturvedi, second question. That's a political
please,
point.
I have just one request when I come on your channel. Please don't interrupt. Just allow. I was making one single point about Andhra Pradesh, because the BJP spokesperson said we are anti Andhra Pradesh, we are anti Bihar. Now, having said that about Bihar, now who has been in government for past 20 years in Bihar? Majorly, it has been the BJP JDU. In between, the JDU changed its mind and moved with the RJD. What did they do in 20 years? And they're talking about, oh, look, lowest in per capita income. What did you do to raise their per capita income? And again, the same question applies to Bihar. Why is it that for 10 years, Bihar was kept deprived? And suddenly a whole lot of schemes are being announced. And your third point I just make, and it will be less than 30 seconds. You're talking about the Consolidated Fund of India. Yes, Consolidated Fund of India, as per the Finance Commission, decides how much every state allocates. But the Union Budget of India gives the Finance Minister the right to decide how much will she allocate as a special package or a special development infrastructure project that goes under her domain. So don't confuse the two, please. Consolidated Fund of India works on the central government schemes and how it will be allocated on the states, whether it is with the, when GST Council meets, that is also a formula which has been decided. But even the release of funds for the GST, etc., are actually held back or released on the basis of the politics of the BJP.
Okay,
That is the
Abhijit Sarangi,
difference.
quick response
Don't confuse
to
the
the
two.
point that she made about Bihar. You've been in power in
Let
Bihar
me
since
tell you
2010.
that let me tell you that this particular budget is central government budget. This is not Bihar government budget. So let's not bring in those parties who had been ruling Bihar. Now here,
No, you were only
Congress
ruling
party
Bihar
had
with
been in
JDU.
position for the past 60
Ma'am,
years.
you've been only in power in Bihar.
No, I'm saying
for the large
that
part of the last
Congress
20
party,
years.
Congress party, when it brought out the budget, Congress party, when it brought out the budget in all these years, why didn't it think of getting all these bridges and expressways done in Bihar, or getting the Amravati capital built, or getting into the infrastructure creation in Andhra Pradesh?
Okay.
So I think These people are making a mountain out of a molehill because they want to criticize, because they
Actually,
have to stay relevant.
Okay.
And if they don't criticize, I think they'll be going against their job challenge.
All right, I am
So I
afraid
think it's
I'm
all a
completely
question
out
of
of
being
time. Thank you
relevant
very
in the
much,
system
Amaraj
and being in
Dasarangi,
the-
Priyanka Chaturvedi, Jabi Mathur, and Mr. Shivnath from the TDP. We'll see how this plays out, the politics of it, through the discussion on the finance bill, which is underway in the parliament. Up next, we dissect the budget from the views of both sides from an economic prism. We'll leave the politics aside for a second. We'll be joined by two very eminent economic minds, former deputy chiefs of the Planning Commission and the Niti Aayog. Former deputy chief of the Planning Commission, Dr. Montek Singh will be joining us, and followed by him will be the former vice chairperson of the Niti Aayog, Professor Rajiv Kumar. All right, so we've dealt with the political aspect of the budget. Let's talk about hard economics of the budget. Does the numbers of the budget, the economics and the priorities of the Modi government come through in the budget that was presented yesterday by Nirmala Sitharaman? The face-off continues over the union budget between the centre and the opposition. The Congress has slammed the budget, calling it a copy-paste job from its own party Lok Sabha election manifesto, saying it does not address root causes of problems like unemployment, income inequality, price rise and the agrarian distress. The opposition even protested against the government over the allocations, a large chunk of it being cornered by two states for obvious political reasons, Andhra Pradesh and Bihar, calling this discriminatory towards other states. In fact, 4 opposition chief ministers will skip the upcoming Niti Aayog meeting on the 27th of July. This is in protest. The opposition termed the union budget a kursi bachao budget driven by political compulsions and claimed that opposition-ruled states have got a raw deal. But to try and get to the nub of this debate, whether this budget was good on detail, whether it stuck to the fiscal glide path, whether it may have been shorn of a grand vision, but it was a nuts and bolts budget, or whether, as the opposition says, it was completely bereft of any grand ideas, we try and decode the budget via the economic lens from both sides of the economic aisle, as it were. I want to first go across to Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, former Deputy Chief of the Planning Commission. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahluwalia, for speaking with us. First things first, what is your impression of the budget? What, according to you, were the big takeaways? While on the one hand, people have said there are no big-ticket reform ideas in the budget, but it's good in the nuts and bolts. It's ticked off all the boxes, whether it is the concern around jobs, whether it is getting more women into the workforce, and most importantly, it has stuck to all the fiscal targets without spending too much. So a sort of nuts and bolts kind of budget, maybe without vision, as it were.
Well, thank you for having me on your program. You know, I think we need to put our expectations about the budget or any budget in some perspective. I mean, there's a tendency when a budget is presented, and quite legitimately, the people want to look at it to see whether it solves all the many problems facing the economy. But realistically, I think you need to have a structured approach. The most important thing about a budget is, does it ensure macroeconomic stability? I mean, that's what everybody looks at first. And I think that from that perspective, the finance minister has done a good job. She's actually slightly improved the fiscal deficit compared to the interim budget earlier. But more importantly, she's stuck to her earlier promise that it's going to be 4.9% this year, and it's going to go down to 4.5%. I would have been happier if she had mentioned a target for the year beyond that. You know, traditionally, in the old days, the fiscal deficit, the macroeconomic framework document would mention the fiscal deficit target for the next 2 years. Now, what the finance minister has said is that it's going to be 4.5, and that thereafter, she thinks it will keep going down a little bit so that the debt to GDP ratio falls. Now, that's actually quite a weak test because, you know, if the economy grows at, say, 6 or 7%, then you could have a gentle fall in the debt to GDP ratio, even though the fiscal deficit still remains a little high.
Okay.
So I would have been happier if she had said it's going to be 4.5% next year, and we're going to bring it down to 4% the year after. But it's clear that if you look at it, to the extent to which fiscal imbalances are a problem, I think most people looking at the budget will say this sends the right signals.
I do want to ask you about one particular sort of pain point. There are a couple, but the first one from a very viewer/middle class point of view has been on this whole business of taking away indexation on real estate for long-term capital gains on real estate. Now, the government's argument, and we spoke yesterday to the Revenue Secretary and the people who made the budget, and their argument is, A, the rate has been significantly brought down from 20% to 12.5%, so that should compensate for the taking away of the indexation. And two, they want to bring some kind of uniformity for all long-term capital gains tax across all asset classes, whether it is gold or real estate or whatever other asset class. Does that justification, does that defense hold? Because, like I said, on our Twitter feeds, on our social media, even, just people who are calling in, our viewers are complaining about this the most, the fact that indexation has been taken away from real estate sales.
But generally, any withdrawal of an existing incentive does lead to some negative commentary. I'm not surprised at that. Frankly, I personally feel that it would have been much better if the finance minister, she has said that we are going to do a comprehensive relook at the Income Tax Act. That is actually necessary. The present act is a agglomeration of amendments. That about 6,000 amendments have been made since the act was last passed in 1961. It would have been much better if we had put out the whole reform so that people could look at what the totality of it is. Now, she said she's going to do that. And I think that it's very important how it's done. I am not very fond of the idea that you just do a lot of internal reviews and then make the change. I think maybe you should take a leaf out of the 1991 budget when instead of making changes, what the finance minister then, Dr. Manmohan Singh, did was he appointed a very high-level committee, which included Radha Chalaya as its head, to look at the whole tax structure. And they prepared a report. That report was made public. So it gave an opportunity to discuss it. And I think if we are going to see a review, a reform of the income tax, I think it would be nice to take a look at the totality. I'm glad that they're talking of doing it. I just hope that it's not just an internal mechanism. I have the same comment on another quite important announcement that she made, not an actual announcement, but what she said was on customs duties, we are going to review the customs duties in the course of the next 6 months. Now, there's been a lot of discussion in many places that our duties are far too high. We are entering into FTAs. We should align our duties with the duties, external duties of the FTA areas. And I think here again, it would be a good idea not just to do an internal review, but to have a top-class expert group submit a report. You don't have to follow what they say, but if you make that report public, then people are able, before the next budget, to actually have a proper discussion. Otherwise, everybody is waiting for something, and suddenly it's announced. Immediately it gets into the political arena. It's not an environment in which you can have a very sensible view on these things.
I do want to ask you, Dr. Ahluwalia, about taxation, because again, that's the thing that concerns most people who are watching this broadcast, is over the last few years, there is a definitive thrust from the government to move towards what they call the new tax regime, which is essentially what you save, how much you save is your problem, the taxpayer's problem, not so much the government's concern. And the government wants to do away with all of this, PF investment and investment in housing loans and so on and so forth, because that's not the job of the government. The job of how much an individual saves or invests is that individual's concern. Directionally, if at some point, and she was asked a question about this in the press conference, if there is a sunset to the old tax regime and the new tax regime is the only one that's in operation, directionally, is that something that you agree with?
Oh, I certainly do. The whole point of introducing a new tax regime is they're taking care of some of the pre-existing problems. People have had some time to adjust. Here again, if you subject this thing to a group of experts who could tell you what are the dangers of not doing it, you would have a more prepared public. But I think the idea of having two tax regimes and people choose whichever tax regime they want doesn't actually make much sense. So we should be moving to a new tax regime. But what I feel is that we should devise that regime based on the recommendation of some experts which are made public. So you can have full discussion before the next budget. And I would say the same for customs duties.
I want to get one final question. I guess what the big thrust, a large part of her speech was dedicated to jobs, particularly jobs for young people who are entering the workforce. So whether it is payment of 3 months' salary in 3 different tranches, whether it is incentivizing corporates to hire interns. I think 1 crore interns is what she said with the top 500 firms, 5,000 rupees as some kind of a stipend to these interns. Forget about the politics of it. People are saying that this is in response to the mandate and the need for young people to be employed and employed well enough. But that's a separate matter. I want to ask you if these measures will work. Will this help formalize more and more people into the formal sectors of employment?
Well, I think, look, the overall employment problem is a very large one. And I don't think any individual actions will make a huge difference. I mean, after all, the biggest impact on employment is really going to be, will we maintain a high enough rate of growth? I mean, if the growth rate slips and you have these schemes, it's not going to make any difference. So you need that high growth. I think you also need a structure of incentives where middle-scale enterprises, not very capital intensive, also have an incentive to expand. Some of what's being done, for example, on access to credit for middle-scale enterprises is a good thing. But remember, we've had these things before. You know, in all of this, the devil is in the detail. So unless all this is spelt out, it's very difficult to judge exactly what would happen. But more broadly, I do think that we are behind the curve on the apprenticeship system compared to Europe, compared to Singapore, compared to South Korea. And I think the idea of encouraging our larger corporate sector to take on more apprentices is a good one. Now, how it works will depend on the detail. We don't have all that. And for example, it's not clear at the moment whether this is purely voluntary or it's compulsory or what. So some of this will have to be sorted out. But, you know, I think there are the skilling, the deficiency of skilling cannot only be taken care of by apprenticeship schemes. I mean, we need to do a major job in upgrading our capacity to skill our workforce. And we've known this for the last 15 years. I mean, there have been innumerable schemes which are designed to make the skill programs more relevant, even to bring the private sector in. But for some reason, they don't seem to be working. So I think what we'd like to see is a critical evaluation. Why have they not worked? And what are we doing now that would be different?
All right. Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to hear your perspective on the budget that's just been presented. Thank you. All right. Now to try and get the view from the other side, I'm now joined by Professor Rajiv Kumar. He's former Vice Chairman of the Niti Aayog. Thank you very much, sir. Just before you joined, we had a friend of yours from across the aisle, Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, join us, and he gave us his perspective on the budget. I want to start off with what many, certainly our viewers on social media, on our phone lines, the big pain point that they're talking about is this removal of indexation on long-term capital gains tax for real estate. How would you explain to them the rationale for taking away the indexation on real estate?
Hi, Zaka. Great to be here. And honestly, to begin with, I was also taken aback with the removal of the indexation. And I said, what's going on here? And you know, what I found out is that if you, with the decline in the long-term capital gains from 20% to 12.5% on real property, on real estate, as long as you sell a property within, let's say, a reasonable period of time, 3, 4, 5 years, then you stand to actually gain, by what's happened, because your inflation, is whatever is 20% or something like that, and your property goes up by a similar amount, and you pay a much lower tax than 20% and 12.5%. It's when the long term kicks in, when you're selling a property after 20 years, 25 years, etc. That is when it hurts, because that is when your inflation would have gone up much more. And in fact, there's a situation, many people have worked it out, that if you buy a property for 1 crore 20 years ago and sell it at 3 or 4 crores, and if you allow for indexation, you actually end up saying that your property value today is lower than what it was when you bought it. Now, so it's a long-term situation, about 15, 20 years, where removal of indexation, net of the decline in the reduction in the tax rate will matter. Now, that will affect people mostly who are inheriting property, honestly, most of the time. Because most of us, when we, there's the two things about property. One, that you invest in it to, for example, live in it, or to start a business in it, etc. Now, that's not an investment in an asset class. An investment in asset class is when you are investing in real estate to try and make some capital gains in a period of time and then sell it. That's your speculative, if you like, or investment class. Now, in that, as I said, most people, for example, don't hold other asset classes also for a very long term. Equities or gold, etc., etc. So net, for the short-term duration of real property holding, the reduction in the long-term capital gains tax combined with the removal of the indexation would leave that property holder still better off.
So I have two clarifications to seek on that. One is, like you said, in India, and you're well aware of this, people are not buying houses just as an asset class. There's sentiment attached to it and so on and so forth. And people don't, buy and sell a house in 5 years or 7 years. They keep a house for like 20 years. So what happens to those people who in their 20s or 30s bought a house and either after 20 years want to upgrade to a bigger house or want to leave from their workplaces, go back to their hometowns and therefore want to sell the house? Because what this does is the longer you hold that property, the more you're ending up paying in tax because indexation has been taken off. That's number one. Number two, wouldn't this also lead to further underreporting of the actual value of these transactions, i.e., that let's say 70% value is shown and the remaining 30% is, as they say very famously in this part of the world, taken in black?
On both points, you are correct, Zaka. I agree with you that, and that's the second one is actually probably more important, that already the real estate market, the property market is seen as an instrument of, if you like, money laundering or, dealing in cash, etc., etc. And that might well be encouraged by this action, because you want to, lower your selling price, registered selling price by as much as you can. So that will happen. But on the other hand, while I agree with you, it's a very specific case of people, of migrants moving into a town, then living there for 20 years and then moving back, etc. Now, as I said earlier, 99% of those people will actually leave the house to their inheritors, and the inheritors will have to pay a higher tax, undoubtedly. And now, I don't mind that, because I think in most countries, inheritance, there is inheritance tax, there is a state duty, there is something like that. We don't have that. And it's all right that we don't have that. But in which case, these are like windfall gains. These are gains that you haven't earned. You just inherited them. And if you're paying a slightly higher tax on that after 20 years, I don't think that matters so much.
I want to talk about clearly one of the big thrust areas of the budget was about jobs, particularly jobs for young people who are entering the workforce. And again, in the chat that I had with Dr. Ahluwalia, he said two things. One, it's a good thing, but we're not sure about, A, is it voluntary or mandatory for these top 500 companies to employ these interns? Two, why would they employ or hire at the lower end if there is no requirement? What is the incentive for them to do so? And he says, if you were to look at, let's say, the European model of apprenticeship or the American model of apprenticeship, we are not quite there. We don't quite have that same system.
Yeah, but we want to get there. We're not quite there, but that's and the intention of the budget is to try and nudge the companies towards that, which is to have a higher intake of apprentices or interns on the roll, and offering actually net fiscal incentive for that. Now, it is surely voluntary. It cannot be mandatory, because if it is mandatory, then you would get into a lot of trouble, because then you'll get all sorts of coercion and this and that and the other. And It's not clear in the budget. That's why that's true. But it should be clarified that it is voluntary. And then also, it may not be restricted to the top 500. I said yesterday on a channel that that's a good beginning, but you can expand it to the next 500 or whatever you like. And and if it works, then I think it's one of the best ways to close the gap between the skills that are demanded and the skills which are supplied, by the current skill development programs or the ITIs, etc., etc. And I have this wonderful example from Pune, the Maharashtra Open University run by Vivek Sawant, where every student is also an apprentice, and they get 120% placement. And every student also, is apprenticing in the factories over the week, and over the weekend, they have their courses. I think it's a great step in that direction, and it is what is required in a even more larger scale, if you like, because the apprenticeship, especially the German model, is the way to go for our, for us to utilize our young talent and the youth and the pool that we've got, rather than leave them to be unemployable by the skill training that they get otherwise.
One final question. This is quasi-political, quasi-economic. There's a lot of hangama today in Parliament by the opposition, who are saying basically that, look, a bulk or the lion's share of yesterday's budget announcements have been cornered by two states, Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, and not for economic reasons, but for purely political reasons, because the Modi government depends on these two coalition partners from Bihar and Andhra Pradesh. Is that a valid criticism?
Well, not in terms of the budget numbers. It might be valid in the number in the terms of number of words used for Bihar and Andhra as a total number of words in the budget speech. And that might be well true. But if you look at the actual numbers of expenditures, the share of total expenditure of 48.1 lakh crores, going to Bihar and Andhra is in several decimal places. It's infinitesimal. It's not very much. It's a few. It's 10,000 crores there, 15,000 crores there. And the other important thing that we should remember is that a large part of it, the finance minister clarified, will come from additional resources to be mobilized from multilateral development banks, for which the central government only offers a sovereign guarantee, and that's the only cost that it meets. And in fact, these will be loans on very soft terms, undoubtedly, but these are additional to what the budget is presenting. And the budget allocation for them is actually quite small if you look at it. So, yes, in terms of the attention given in the speech, it is inordinate, and it's clearly, it's 2 out of the 28, which looks odd. But in terms of actual expenditure in the budget, the argument doesn't hold.
All right, Professor Rajiv Kumar, it's always a pleasure speaking with you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us with your thoughts and perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so there you heard it from two sides of the economic divide, as it were. First from Dr. Ahluwalia, and then subsequently from Professor Rajiv Kumar, as to what they think of Nirmala Sitharaman's budget 24-25. We leave the political verdict to the people and, of course, to the proceedings in Parliament, where the discussion on the finance bill is continuing. It will go on till the early part of next week. If you'd been tuned in to Brass Tacks from me, Zaka Jacob, and the rest of the team, we were coming to you live from the CNN News 18 Federal Bank Primetime Studio. Thank you very much for your time. Good night.
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The US presidential race is heating up. Kamala Harris is putting up a fight. A new poll puts her ahead of Donald Trump. She's getting more endorsements from her party and what's being called a historic flood of cash. So can she beat Donald Trump? We look at how the contest is shaping up and what the Republican Party's strategy is. And in the middle of all of this, a guest has landed in Washington. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will tell you what he's doing there when his country is at war and why he's facing public protests and a political pushback. In Bangladesh, the return of calm and internet connectivity after days of violent protests. Also some very disturbing images of the crackdown. In Kenya, the president has inducted opposition leaders in the cabinet. We'll tell you why. News of another plane crash in Nepal and a report on the country's horrid aviation record. In the UK, the king's income soars and the National Health Service crumbles. In Paris, a gang rape just before the Olympic Games begin. How China's economic slowdown is hitting global luxury brands, while landslides kill hundreds of people in Ethiopia every year, and what is an emotional hangover.